How do plants actually pump water? Well, this is a quite tricky question, but once you understand the fundamental law, you will easily answer this question. The fundamental law I talked earlier is the cohesion tension theory. It's a theory of how plants pump water. But before we get something too scientific, let's get to something that we will understand because we use them almost in our daily life. Now, I called the syringe and the tube as a representative. Now, the leaf is pretty much like the syringe. They pull the water upward from the tube itself. The tube acts like a xylem in the law. They store water, they pull them upwards up to the leaf. But before the xylem, we also got the roots. The roots is pretty much like the tube's end. They suck the water from underground. And it's just an illustration, so absolutely do not draw these on your exam. Now, let's go. There are three parts needed. First is the roots. Roots act as an entry point for the water. They also work as the selective barrier, and they also supply the plant with water by osmosis. The second part is called the xylem. Xylem acts as the pipe for the water, and they pull the water upwards using the cohesion tension theory. Now they were made from hydrophilic and strong material because this is the place where cohesion and adhesion occur. Now, the third major part is called the leaves. Leaves create a pull for the water because they are responsible for controlling the water speed. And this is the place where transpiration happens. Now, let's understand about osmosis. Osmosis is the movement of solvent, usually water. Remember, it's the movement of the water, not the minerals, salts, or something concentrated inside the liquid. And they move past through a selective membrane from place with lower concentration to the higher ones. So both mixture has the same concentration. Now, this lower liquid is called hypotonic since it only has 40% lower than the upper ones, hypertonic, since it only got 60% in salts and minerals concentration. Now the hypotonic said like, yo, you got so many minerals, let me back you up with my water. And so the water passed through the selective membrane to the hypertonic ones until they were all even. One's got 50% minerals, one's got 50% minerals. This is called the isotonic state. Now, there are three results of osmosis. First is the turgid or lyse. This is when the cells get swollen but being held together by the cell wall. But in animal cells, we don't have such thing called cell wall. So the cells get swollen and sometimes explode. But don't worry, sometimes the cells also normalize. This is when the cells doesn't have any change due to the isotonic state, so no water came in or came out. Now, the third result is called the plasmolysis or crenation in animal cells. This is when the cells shrink because the water exceeds the cells and they were shrinking below normal. But in animal cells, the liquid exceeds so much that it causes it to wrinkle. Now, the roots also done osmosis. This is how do they get water because the hypertonic cells and hypotonic soil is in one place. So the cells are full with minerals such as salt that makes it hypertonic, and the soil usually has lower concentration in salts. And if the salt concentration is higher, the plants cannot do osmosis, so it will die of thirst. This also explains why most plants cannot live in the beach. Now, the hypotonic soil urges the water to balance the concentration in the hypertonic root hair cells. What is root hair? Root hair is a thing that expands the root over area so it can absorb more water. Now, often the water enters the cell walls and membrane let the water through. But for your information, both sides cannot reach balance since the water will quickly be streamed into the xylem, keeping the root hypertonic and not full with water. Now, in the xylem, this is the place where cohesion and adhesion occur. Think it like a two-person climbing a cliff with two ropes. The cohesion is in the hands holding to each other, enables them to keep contact, and it prevents them to both fall at the same time. While adhesion is pretty much like their hands grabbing the rope. It enables them to creep up slowly and it prevents them to fall back down. Now, in the xylem, cohesion is the bond between one water molecules to the other molecules. This is to prevent them snap from their own water column. Why, if they snap from their water column, transpiration will be really bad. It can damage the leaf and other parts. Now, the adhesion is the bond between the water molecules to the walls around the stem, especially when the walls are hydrophilic or loving the water. One of the examples is lignin and the xylem. Now, in xylem, cohesion keeps the water columns stay connected and they keep continuous flow even under the pressure of the leaves transpiration that suck them up. While adhesion pretty much prevents the water column to slip and fall back down to the root, making the root hypotonic and cannot absorb water. Now, xylem has a few main roles. They act as a hydrophilic to make it a pipe that attracts the water to creep upwards, and they were formed by dead cells and covered by lignin to make it stronger so they can withstand the force of the leaf sucking. Now, they also supplies water to various organs, such as fruits and also the leaf or the engine itself. They were in charge so the water get distributed and make sure the roots keep absorbing the water. Chain is pretty much like the cohesion and the adhesion is pretty much like the ones dragging the water upwards. Now, let's talk about transpiration. Transpiration is the process where water from the plants evaporated through leaves and the bark, called lenticels, through the atmosphere. Now, we will only highlight the ones evaporating through the leaves. Now, it has an important role in plants. First, it works as a pump to pull the water upwards, since the transpiration sucks the water, making a water present in the xylem goes upward. Also, it has an important role in the ecosystem. They move water from under the ground to the atmosphere. They also help regulate climate and temperature. Now, if you really zoom at the leaves, you can see the stomatal cells. What are them? First, we have the guard cells. They open and close stomata by changing its shape. They also control the stomatal evaporation right here. Now, the second part is called the stomatal pore, or the stomata itself. They regulate air and water through the leaf. They were pretty much like the stomata, but they really loves regulating water and the air. Now, the third part is called the cuticle. Cuticle is a dead part of the plant, pretty much same like the xylem, but this one is covered in cutin. Cutin is pretty much the plant's natural wax, and they help reduce the plant's evaporation via leaf. But as you can see here, the cutin can still evaporate waters, also not as much as the stomata evaporation. Now we have two mesophyll cells, but the one's really important is the mesophyll cells, the palisade one. This is the place where photosynthesis occurred, and they were shaped like a cylinder, while the spongy mesophyll cells, they were connected to the intercellular spaces, the ones you know down there. Now, how do they work? First, it's opening the stomata. The hydrogen ion got pumped out and potassium ion enters the cell, I mean the guard cells, from the surrounding cells. And they were making the guard cells concentration higher. Now this is called the active transport. Water enters the guard cells via osmosis and it was making them at a literal turgor state. So it inflates like a balloon and opening the stomata. Actually it inflates and bends. That's why they were opening the stomata, not closing it. Now we evaporate the water. First, the water enters from the xylem to the spongy mesophyll cells and they were hydrating the leaf. Evaporation occurs and passes through stomata. Cuticle helps preventing over-expiration but still evaporate water. Now, this system pumps water from the xylem to keep the leaf alive and to suck the water from underground. Now, how do they close the stomata? Closing the stomata is pretty simple. The potassium ion got pumped out, hydrogen ions got pumped in, and the cell's concentration is lower. So the water exits the guard cells, making him at a plasmolysis state. The pressure making the guard cells pretty much like deflate and not bend anymore. So the guard cells finally close the stomata. Now, let's talk about the cohesion tension theory because we already understand the parts, their techniques, and their role for pumping water to the plants. First is the roots. Roots is pulling water from the ground to the xylem via osmosis. And in the xylem accepts the water and they transport it upward to the leaves. Now, the water adheres to the hydrophilic xylem, preventing it to fall back down to the root. And the water's cohesion keeps them in one column. This is the role of cohesion and adhesion. And lignin reinforce the xylems so they can exert instant force that pull the water upward. Now, the third part is the leaves. They create the tension that pumps the water by using transpiration. And they are proving the water is pulled by the leaves, they were pulled like that, and not pushed by the roots or the xylem itself. Alright, once you understand it, you can answer my question of the day. But if you don't understand it, please feel free to search another video or explaining to yourself, and also you can replay this video to the part that you didn't understand. Now, I will leave you with the question of the day. Can a tree's height technically be infinite? Explain. If yes, why? And if not, what is the first major parts that come contact with their problem? I'm bunnyfoot, who keeps it simple and easy to understand. Bye bye.